Good morning, everybody. I'm excited today to be joined by my friend David Lisser. He's been on the show before with Pio, and we've done some written interviews. He's a phenomenal artist, published on SuperRare, a member of the Bloom Collective. And David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Mal. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's been an interesting morning getting this coordinated, but happy to be live and doing this with you now. So, can you provide a little bit of your background? We were chatting offline about Houdini and playing around with that and kind of the generative aspect of that and how that actually aligns really well with your background. So, can you share with us a little bit about what type of art you've made traditionally and what that's brought you into NFTs?
Yeah, sure. I trained in sculpture in a sort of traditional fine art school a number of years ago now. And I kind of, for a very long time, I was doing very traditional sorts of things such as casting, working with silicons, working with plaster, um, a little bit of carving and a little bit of metal work and things like that. Um, and then I came into digital route uh, in that I was working on quite a big public commission, like a permanent outdoor sculpture, and I needed a few things being made that I just couldn't do myself. So I was talking to steel fabricators, and they were asking me to supply CAD drawings and everything like that. So I ended up teaching myself CAD in order to just provide these files for these steel workers to turn into sort of shapes that were then rolled and became a sort of part of the sculpture. Um, and during that time, I kind of was just caught by the freedom of creation that digital presents. Although I was working in a very physically bound manner, I could tell that there was potential here to break those bounds and to move into worlds that are not yet possible, or things that are kind of just on the edge of being made. And I suspect that's what you're angling at. You're asking about the meat, aren't you? Yeah,
Yes, yeah. So,
yeah,
and I know it's evolved since then, but when we were chatting, a little bit over a year ago, you were really inspired by some vessel and some of the other pieces that you'd published. And now, like all artists, you've evolved. But it was really interesting to see kind of what this pseudo near future, meat creation looked like, and it's just been so interesting to see how that came to be and how you've evolved past that.
sure. Yeah. So for viewers who don't know my work, I have for the last few years been sort of obsessed, I think is a reasonable way of saying it, with the technology of lab-grown meat, um, which is a sort of synthetic biology way of being able to grow meat outside of the animal by taking kind of a cellular extract and then putting it in a laboratory and feeding it with a growth medium. And I find the whole thing to be utterly fascinating for a number of reasons. I'm sure we'll get into some of the philosophy of why I find that so fascinating. But essentially, my artwork has been using sort of a reimagination of the past to interrogate this and to maybe make new histories for this strange type of technology that we're developing, and to wonder like how can we tell stories about it and how can we use those stories to maybe direct or suggest things about the future trajectory of it all.
I'm muted, but it's incredible to just see how much it has changed and how kind of the art that you've created is it stands out. But like many of the great artists in this space, it is truly unique. The first time my wife saw some of, for instance, Beeple's art, she was a little bit caught off guard by it. And what I love about NFTs in particular, and we talked about this on one of the Bloom spaces, is that essentially NFTs are just the canvas. And because it's just a canvas, you can interpret anything you want. And now with the tools that you've built with, you can start turning those physical pieces into those digital pieces and those one of ones. What in particular stood out for NFTs? Why did you take the dive and actually take a chance on this, especially coming from physical sculpting and those types of art that are even less easy to translate than say a Procreate artist or a Photoshop artist?
Yeah, it is quite a jump in that way, isn't it? And yeah, so as I kind of mentioned right at the start, I was beginning to push into digital as its own little world anyway, and then I suspect, like quite a few people, essentially COVID catalyzed a journey already in process. It really sped things up in that here in the UK, I had early 2020, I had quite a few exhibitions and a couple of commissions and a few sort of big public things lined up for the year. And in February sort of time, I was looking at, a good 10 to 12 months of booked in work, which for a freelance artist is, well, it wasn't a familiar situation for me, let's put it that way. And then at a stroke of a pen in March, that whole year got cancelled. And sculpture is quite an expensive uh, medium. You have to spend a lot of money in the first place in order to make it. And so I was just at this point where like, well, what do I do now? I've got I've got loads of time and no money. And so I just went headlong into digital and kind of picked up various tools that I'm using now and really tried to get to learn from them. And it was kind of through that sort of era that I came across Metageist, Lee Mason, who is a brilliant ambassador for the space and has brought a number of people into NFTs, myself included. And he was essentially doing a little almost like a Zoom seminar about crypto art. And I was just kind of fascinated, really. It was all very new to me. Like my exposure to crypto at that point was pretty minimal. And so the idea that you could essentially tokenize digital assets on a blockchain and that there would be value inherent in that was really something that really caught me. And my work deals a lot with imagining the future. And, that has been through food and through those sort of technologies. But I think a lot about the future and what it might look like. And I think for me, the idea that we are becoming more and more digital is non-arguable. And the idea that we could represent ourselves through the web, through whichever version of web you want to talk about, is also just very apparent. So the idea that we could then link in kind of an asset value to that made a lot of sense, and yet I was still like super confused and skeptical. So I kind of wish I'd just jumped at it when I first heard about it, which was sort of summer, autumn of 2020. But I actually spent like 3 or 4 months researching it first.
You waited for the nifty crash to go all in, basically.
More or less. Well, no, yeah, it's January 2021 was when I really like got my feet wet.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
kind of when it all kind of became, a bigger. It was hard to ignore by that point. And when you think about kind of what that represents and what we've seen from the standpoint of all the innovation that's occurred over the last year and a half, 2 years, it's just so exciting to see. And I'm a big fan of Metageist. We hung out last year at NFT NYC. Phenomenal artist, phenomenal human
Yeah.
being. And so you've been in the space for some time, and then you joined this collective that is, some of my favorite artists in the entire world, independently, even before I knew that y'all all knew each other. Can you give us a little bit of background on your interpretation of Bloom and what brought you in from that mindset?
Sure, yeah. So Bloom to me is a collective of artists who, well, we formed essentially from a mutual respect for each other's work. You know, we all kind of hanging out in a similar sort of circles on Discord and Twitter, and chatting informally, and just you know how it is. But we all held each other's work in really high regard, and we saw each other as essentially pushing for a leveling up of quality and a raising of the discourse around what art could be in this space. And it just made sense actually to start working together, really, because we were looking at each other going, hey, we're all wanting the same thing, approaching it in different styles. So that's brilliant. There's no kind of conflict there. But we all want to just like really push make like some really seriously good quality art in NFTs, and we want to encourage each other, find opportunities to push this, and bring in other people and kind of push the whole medium, really. So yeah, we have a little like informal tagline of art first, and that kind of basically sums it up.
That's yeah, that it's so cool to see. And I mean, we've talked about this a lot, but it's the playbook is actually brilliant. Where you're not going to be able to beat a 10K PFP Discord for a period of time, right? Because humans are fickle, and we all jump into the next project inherently. But when you think about what Bloom represents and kind of how this loose collaboration, conglomeration of people with very different backgrounds who still support each other can create a Discord that now is interactive, where I love your art, but I like someone else's art. I may come in and experience other art and artists. And I really hope that Bloom sets an example for more up and coming artists. I mean, y'all aren't up and coming, y'all are all established now, but up and coming artists should really follow the playbook that you've established. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, and it's a thing that for me is familiar from my sort of art world background as well. Quite often, uh, artists who are not yet like fully like represented at the highest levels will group together and find studio spaces together, or put together shows, or and it's just shared impact, really. It just makes a lot of sense. It's really hard to do this on your own.
Yeah, and I think that it's also that support mechanism, right? When the art and the artists fluctuate. Even like the best artists in the world that I've seen. Just because you mint it doesn't mean that it's going to be purchased in the next 24 hours. And just watching y'all just be that support mechanism is really unlike a lot of stuff that we see in this space, where a lot of the artists unfortunately have mercenary mentality, where I feel like y'all are building Bloom from the standpoint of a rising tide lifts all boats. And it is as you continue, and it's kind of this loose collaboration that even NFT Culture, King of Midtown, Fan3, and so many other groups, NFT Asia, like there's so many groups that it's kind of this counterweight or counterbalance to a lot of the bad habits that exist currently in the space. And so I'm just inspired by the work that you all do. But I do want to get back to you specifically and a little bit more about your background, and who's your favorite artist, NFT or physical IRL?
Oh my word, that's a hard question.
Icky didn't answer it. So
Icky,
yeah,
yeah,
I'll give you top five and then you can say no again.
sure. So physical artists, not that it's a difficult distinction to make, but there's a British artist called Matt Collishaw. He kind of came up at the same sort of time as Damien Hirst and Tracy Emin and those sort of British young artists group in the early 90s. But he kind of like diverged from them a little bit, and I think it's possibly because we share a lot of the similar interests. He works in in the way that technology interacts with our lives in a sort of spiritual or emotional manner, rather than simply just performing tasks. Quite a lot of his work is actually focused on death, which is, a little bit more macabre than mine. But there is crossover, because I'm talking about consumption of meat, which necessarily raises questions of death. And well, yeah, and is eating cultured meat killing? That's a question. But back to Matt Collishaw, he works, and he just makes it all very, very beautiful. Yeah, just is able to kind of create pieces from photography through to spinning sculptures, through to actually some digital installations that he's done as well, that are really on point and able to articulate what it is to kind of live in this strange entanglement with technology and our awareness of what that does to ourselves.
That's brilliant. I'm definitely going to. I'm trying to find information now. I've never heard of him, and I'm going to be looking
Sure.
him up. What?
Matt, I think he just uses one T in his name, if that helps. And then it's COLLISHAW.
Awesome. And he has the on Wikipedia. It's called Bullet Hole. Is part of the Freeze exhibition. Okay, awesome.
That
I will
sounds about
definitely.
right. Yeah.
Sounds a little bit morbid, but I'll definitely take a look. What NFT did you miss out on the most that you wish you had collected?
Oh yeah, this is quite an easy answer for me. Well, I mean, I couldn't afford it, so I'm not beating myself up, but I'm a big fan of Death Beef, who is a generative artist, working kind of on chain and exploring what can be done on chain, with kind of quite limited data. He works, not limited data, but efficient data, which is probably a better way of putting it. He writes everything in C, the programming language, which is, unlike some of the other generative artists. He did a series called Entropy, whereby essentially the token it's a sort of abstract audio visual piece. Music is all coded in C. The video is all coded in C. It's all just pure programming. But the beautiful thing about this is it's kind of this sort of hypnotic, sort of circular shape that kind of glitches in and out, with a sort of vaguely sort of mournful kind of staticky track. But every time that token is transferred, whether that's sold or actually just transferred between like someone's hot wallet and a cold wallet, it degrades slightly. Basically, the function of transferring triggers a sort of counter within the code, and so the process of moving it from wallet to wallet actually affects the artistic output. And I basically, well, I found it. I was kind of in the Discord already, and I was there when it was available to mint, and I just couldn't afford it. It was 3 ETH at the time, and I didn't have 3 ETH. Uh, and I think two have sold ever, and they were for 100 ETH a while ago. And you're not going to buy one now, I don't think, for a few years. I just think it's a beautiful, beautiful use of the technology.
Yeah, it's brilliant because I mean we've talked about part of the things that made baseball cards and comic books, which is right, wrong, or indifferent, a common, not the common, but a common description for many of the NFT projects is that they are fragile and they lack the permanence that the blockchain has, and so purposely building in, as you trade, as you sell, entropy, and kind of that is really interesting from a concept to see the continuation of the art. And I hope that more and more projects start to do it. But this is kind of an aside, and we refocused on art, but part of the culture is you have to talk about everything. And recently there was this project called Wizards, and I don't know if you know it, and we won't spend much time on it, but it it's really interesting because the wizard's contract, if you staked your wizard was safe. But if you listed your wizard for sale, if you staked your wizard, you earn shrooms. And if you have 20,000 shrooms, you can kill another wizard. And if
Oh,
you have your wizard for sale, it's eligible to be killed, and it's built into the
wow.
contract. And so it's like, you get tired of some of these PFP projects and stuff, but then it's also like every once in a while you see something that's truly innovative on the
Mm,
blockchain. And so when you think about the aspects of entropy, and you think about all those other aspects, Mad Dog Jones a while back had the duplicator, the copy machine, that it
exactly.
ended
Yeah.
way premature, like before he wanted it to. But it's just what I love about this medium and NFTs as a canvas is it allows people to not only use the art as the art, but in a lot of instances you can use the contract as the art. And what you're describing is pretty awesome.
100%. Yeah. And I like that Wizards example. Actually, that's it's got a lot of fun, but it also kind of points to the whole gamification of the entire space. It's yeah, and you're right. Contract as art. I'm not a programmer. I've tried. I'm not, but I really enjoy it when people can use it creatively and like really make a point in that way as well. I think it's I for one definitely want to see more like that as well.
Absolutely. So, um, what's next for you related to NFTs? I know Bloom is working on a lot, and I know you're doing a lot with them. Any upcoming events, shows, galleries, and then what's the next few steps for you on your journey?
Yeah, to be honest, Bloom is doing so much that I can't tell you what we're doing next. I'd have to actually refer to a spreadsheet somewhere. It's hard to keep a handle on. But for me, we mentioned before this that I've started to learn Houdini, um, which is a very good program for sort of using systems and procedurally to make things grow, and also to kind of change the parameters of stuff to get a sort of a wide variety of outputs. And I am learning that. It's going to take me a little while, I think, but I'm looking forward to doing a little series that exploits the potential of these growth systems, um, specifically in relation to cultured meat, and seeing that how I can maybe simulate some of that growth in a digital environment. And the simulation aspect is quite important to me because when you think about it, cultured meat is kind of a simulation in itself. It has that essence of truth, as in it's physically based from a cellular extract of an animal, but it's so far removed from it that what is the essence of it? It kind of comes down to the idea of it. Is it meat still, or is it just some sort of, I don't know, tissue? And what's the difference between meat and tissue? And how do we kind of make these distinctions and taxonomies? And I think I'm going to go on a bit of a ramble here, so just interrupt at any point.
No, I
but
love it. I think it's an interesting both. It's a conundrum, right?
It sure is, and I think that's why I'm so fascinated with it, because I kind of can't decide fully what I think of it. I haven't arrived at a concrete opinion, and I think that's quite healthy. But I also think it means that I'm in an interesting place that I can explore something from various angles. Um, and returning to the simulation point, there are a number of companies globally who are working on it. Scaling the kind of actual growth is a real problem for like making it affordable. But a big problem is consumer acceptance because of this like, what is it sort of question. And a way that people are attempting to mitigate that is by growing the meat into recognizable forms. So either having it as, making a sort of mince and making burgers or sausages or patties or whatever. But also there are plenty of people who are trying to mimic steaks or mimic fish, or mimic, certain cuts or joints of meat. And I get it. I get it that, like, as consumers, we go towards the familiar, and we're freaked out by stuff that looks too weird, especially when it comes to food. But I also think we're missing out on some, like, really interesting opportunity here. Like, if you're going to grow meat from the start, why does it have to be a steak? Why can't it be some sort of, like, spiral sculpture? Why can't you hand it over to some sort of, like, really, like, high thinking chef who can make it into a particular shape that actually might affect the eating experience? And these are the things that I'm wrestling with, and which is and why I think digital simulation of what could be a simulation itself is an interesting approach to take.
That's wild. Yeah, it's like, does your steak have to cross the uncanny valley for you to want to eat it? And then, like,
Right.
but like, hypothetically, with simulations, you could have, a fat to fiber simulate, like, distribution that starts to figure out kind of what that looks like. And then you also think about, like, to your second point of, like, the movie Gattaca, where there's, like, certain music that can only be played if you had, like, 12 fingers. Like, is there some future where we solve this meat challenge in a humane way? Well, we get to eat our cake and have it too, or we get to enjoy all the benefits. But then once you unlock at a cellular level, and you probably know way more about this than anyone that I've ever talked to, is like, yeah, could you change the experience, and then could you come up with new methods, more efficient ways to feed people, or even more delicacies? Like, that's it's wild. And then you think about how Houdini, which you and Nikki and Christian talk about a lot, is that Houdini not only is a visualization platform, but it's in a lot of instances, from the way I'm interpreting what you've said, is its own programming language where you can build out custom simulations. So it's that's wild. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't even know how
I
you
mean, I
go down
think
that path.
I've got a bit of a way to go before I can build out my own custom simulations. But yeah, it's that sort of area. And then you have people working purely in Unity, which is again a program I don't know, and they are very much working with coding, but they are kind of, there's quite a whole subsection of people who are simulating Physarum, which is like a type of mold, and simulating that growth incredibly accurately, almost like, as far as I understand, like physically accurate. And so there could be this strange spillover where we're mocking up things digitally first to understand all of the parameters, and then actually what we're doing then goes over to the lab and becomes real, quote unquote. And I'm not saying that I'm about to start working for a meat company, but I think I think that it's kind of back to the NFT point, right? The physical and the digital, these worlds of, there's no, yeah, that's a very porous border.
It's an exciting time to be alive. Where can collectors find you, learn more about you?
Sure. Well, Twitter's always a good place, which I see you've got the little handle up there. Super is where I'm kind of primarily working at the moment. I think I still have one piece available there, as of today. Actually, I sold a piece this morning, so I'm very happy about that, especially in these market conditions. And then I've kind of got a pinned tweet at the top of my timeline that sort of gives a good idea of, I think I call it "Why All the Meat," David, and it sort of is a bit of a maybe summarized version of the conversation we've just had, with a few more pictures and a little bit more digestible format.
That's awesome. Well, David, as always, I appreciate you coming on and really being an early ambassador for NFTs and for NFT culture. You and Christian were two of the first people to give me an opportunity. And so I want to say thank you. And I hope that we can continue to have you back on. Maybe get you and some of the other crew on in the near future. And whenever you have new drops, would love to have you on to go into to more details about that. But I thank you for everything, and thank you for your friendship.
All right, likewise, mate, and thank you for this time. It's always a pleasure to chat to you.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Make sure you follow David Lisser at David Lisser. Make sure you follow us. Make sure you like and subscribe. It helps the channel. We're still looking for a full-time host. If anyone knows anyone that loves NFTs and video and interviewing amazing artists like David, please reach out to us. Everyone stay safe and happy, and remember why we are here. Take care, everybody.